Thursday edition of PFT OT, the extra show beyond PFT Live, where we delve into some topics we didn't get to or things we would like to talk about a little bit more. Now, this is one that I got a chance to talk about, but Charean didn't because we had some technical difficulties at the top of the show. The injury to Nick Bosa. And one of the concerns about the Bosa brothers is durability. We've seen plenty of injuries, and there's been a red flag with Nick Bosa, and some people think maybe they should have taken Quinnen Williams instead of Nick Bosa with the second overall pick. But he's injured again. He may not play in the preseason. He's got an ankle problem. On the same day, cornerback Jason Verrett, a guy they really like, has an ankle issue as well. And Charean, I just feel like there's something up with these 49ers where at a certain point, it's not luck. At a certain point, there's something that you're not doing properly to get you guys ready to play week in and week out, to keep them healthy. You see guys get pretzeled and twisted all the time at all sorts of angles and positions, and they get up and they're fine. And I really do think there are fundamental differences between facilities, training staffs, medical staffs, rehab processes that allow some teams to keep their guys healthy, and for other teams, it's not a cluster of bad luck. It's a different type of cluster altogether that causes these players to constantly be injured. And if I'm a 49ers fan, I'm getting concerned that there's some fundamental issue there that is keeping these guys from being healthy all the time.
Well, the 49ers certainly have had their share of injuries, no question about that. But so has Nick Bosa. He just can't seem to stay healthy. Of course, played only 3 games last season, and I really thought he needed to play in the preseason because of that. Now, his brother Joey Bosa, we know, had the holdout as a rookie and didn't play and came in, was great when once he came in the regular season. But Nick Bosa didn't play enough last year and hadn't played enough in college. I don't think that he needed the reps in the preseason. But whatever the 49ers problem is, they have had an awful lot of injuries, more than their share of injuries. And at some point, I think you start looking at things and evaluating to see why all of these injuries are happening and if there's anything you can do better to prevent them.
But remember, when Joey Bosa showed up after his holdout, he had a hamstring problem, missed his first 4 games of the season, went on to be the Defensive Rookie of the Year. So that injury issue has been there for the Bosas, and it continues to be there for the 49ers. And that's, as we get closer and closer to the regular season and into the regular season, that's when that optimism and that hope starts to pop for some of these teams. And for the 49ers, it feels like each of the last 2 years and going into now a third year, you're just bracing for that injury that's going to fundamentally alter the fate of the franchise. And really, it is injuries. I don't want to jinx anybody, but that really is the thing that determines who can survive. Every year, there's a team that had minimal numbers of players that land on injured reserve, and you see that team ends up making it to the playoffs. I mean, you get, and a lot of it is luck, Charean, but I really do believe a lot of it is having the right procedures in place to get your guys healthy, keep your guys healthy, and allow them to survive moments on the field that for players on other teams end up in an injury.
Well, and to me, that's why we go back to 2 years ago. And when we start reviewing them in history, the Eagles are going to go down as one of the greatest teams in NFL history because of what they overcame to get there and win it. I mean, a backup quarterback winning a Super Bowl, yes, we've seen that some before, but they lost their left tackle, Jason Peters. They lost Jordan Hicks. They just had an insurmountable number of injuries, and yet somehow they overcame all of that and still won the Super Bowl. It just doesn't happen, and they're one of the rare teams that was able to do it, which speaks to how good they were from top to bottom that year.
Yeah, and depth is critical in a salary capped environment. The money that you keep behind to pay for guys who can come in and play at a high level when there are injuries, and you know they're inevitable, those teams are going to be best suited to surviving those ups and downs that inevitably occur when injuries happen. All right, in Tampa, interceptions inevitably happen for Jameis Winston, and he's a guy, Charean, that I've always viewed as someone who tries to do a little bit more than he physically can do. He tries to will himself into greatness. He tries to will his team into greatness, and that can lead to some awkward moments like the Eda W pregame speech from a couple of years ago. But his GM, Jason Light, tells SiriusXM NFL Radio that he sees a calmer Jameis Winston this year, a guy who isn't a rah-rah type, a guy who is going about his business with a demeanor of someone who expects to win, expects to not make mistakes, and expects the team to be better than it's been. I don't know that that's going to make a bit of difference for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but we've seen the first 4 years with Jameis Winston, something hasn't been right there. And if the influence of Bruce Arians in part includes getting Jameis Winston to just kind of calm it down, take it slow, exude the right mindset of a quarterback where there's an expectation where you don't have to yell, you don't have to do goofy things, you don't have to eat a W, you don't have to make your teammates look at each other thinking, what's wrong with this guy? And it's all in how you carry yourself. And maybe that will make a difference. Maybe that's just part of what transforms Jameis Winston into the quarterback the Buccaneers have always hoped he was going to be.
You know, during the show, we talked about who's going to throw the most interceptions in the league this year. Neither one of us picked Jameis Winston. And the reason I didn't pick Jameis Winston, and you hit on it, is Bruce Arians. I just think he can get more out of Jameis Winston than what we've seen in the NFL. And I go back to what a good quarterback Jameis Winston was in college under Jimbo Fisher. And I talked to Jimbo Fisher yesterday, but he got the most out of Jameis Winston, and you expect Bruce Arians to get the most out of Jameis Winston in the NFL. Now, what is the most that Jameis Winston has in the NFL? I think we're going to find out this year. It's a very important year, obviously, for Jameis Winston, because if he doesn't get it done, he's going to be looking for a new employer after this year. So being calmer, I think, is going to help him, and I think Bruce Arians is going to help him with that confidence and staying calmer out there on the football field. And I think there's going to be fewer interceptions this year.
And on the issue of Winston possibly leading the league in interceptions, one of the reasons I don't think he will is I think that Bruce Arians will turn to him and say, get your ass on the bench halfway through the season if Jameis Winston is continuing to do the things that Arians doesn't want him to do. And I don't think Arians would hesitate. If he thinks it's necessary to bench Jameis Winston and go with someone else, that's what he will do. Regardless of who the quarterback is in Tampa, receiver Mike Evans, one of the very best in the National Football League, and he's very soft-spoken. He's very quiet. A Texas A&M great who came into the league with Johnny Manziel. And I remember guys like Jim Rome criticizing him because he's not a good interviewer. Well, you know what? He just doesn't have much to say. It's on us to draw it out of him. But now he's got something to say. And he says it would be a major disappointment if the Buccaneers aren't better this year than what they've been during his time in the NFL. I mean, this is a team that hasn't been to the playoffs since 2007, and they haven't even been a serious contender. They had 1 year in 2016 where they were kind of putting it together. They had that winning streak. They lost to the Cowboys in Dallas on a Sunday night, and that kind of ended it. But Mike Evans, a guy who says very little, coming out and saying it will be a major disappointment if the Buccaneers don't make it this year. That's one of the things that has kind of drawn me to the Buccaneers as a team that I'm just keeping an eye on them because I love Bruce Arians and I love a great story, and it would be fascinating if he could go to Tampa and turn this thing around.
You know, I talked earlier about DeAndre Hopkins kind of being under the radar when we start naming top receivers in this league, and it's because he's not as outspoken too, probably. But you do that with Mike Evans, and you forget about him when you start naming the top receivers in the league. And this is a guy who produces 1,000 yards year after year after year, and maybe should have been the Heisman Trophy winner at A&M that year because he made Johnny look great. He made so many great catches. And has been just as good in the NFL, but he's played on some bad teams. They've had one winning record since he's been there, and I know he wants more. And so when he speaks, he's quiet. I don't think he's a bad interview because I've had some great interviews with him. When he speaks, he says a lot, but he's very quiet, very soft-spoken, and he doesn't say a whole lot unless you pull it out of him. But when he does speak like he did, in this interview saying, I'm going to be disappointed if we don't get done what I think we can do, then you know that he thinks they've got a pretty good football team and thinks they can win this year.
The key to interviewing Mike Evans is you always better have your next question ready because you're going to have to ask it sooner than you ever imagined because he's not going to give you a very long answer. And if it calls for a yes or no, you're not getting yes or no in an explanation. You're getting yes or no, and then he just waits for the next question. But look at the career this guy's had. 5 NFL seasons, 6,100 receiving yards, 40 touchdowns, and he had a career high in 2018 with 1,524 receiving yards on 86 catches for a 17.7-yard average. That was a career high as well. And, yeah, it's just like nobody pays attention to Mike Evans. Well, you know what? If they thrive this year, he's one of the first names that we're going to be mentioning when we talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. When we talk about the Buffalo Bills, one of the first names we mention is LaShawn McCoy, in large part because they don't have a lot of other star players. As we mentioned is when we were doing our rundown of the various games to be played tonight, week 1 of the preseason, LaShawn McCoy did not have a big year in 2018 for the Bills. He played in 14 games. He barely had over 500 yards, averaged 3.2 yards per carry, and he's got a big salary for 2019. And there's been some suggestion that maybe, just maybe, he would be cut. That hasn't happened. But, Charean, I've seen this time and again where a team will go to a player at a time when there's no other option out there in free agency. The rosters are set elsewhere, and that's when you squeeze the guy. And it's a very reasonable case. Look, we just can't justify $6.5 million this year. We want to pay you $3.5 million, and we want the rest to be in incentives or something like that. But I think LeSean McCoy should be bracing for something between now and Labor Day weekend where the Bills come to him and suggest that he redo his deal and take less money, or else they're going to go with the other guys they have, and they have plenty of other guys at running back this year, led by future Hall of Famer Frank Gore.
Yeah, normally you don't see the preseason as big for veterans, but for LeSean McCoy, I do think it's big. I think he needs to show him something. He's going to start in that Week 2 preseason game, and I think he needs to play well. And, you know, a lot depends on how Frank Gore looks tonight, too. If Frank Gore looks terrific, I mean, why wouldn't you move on from LeSean McCoy and say, you know, we've got enough running backs here that we can make it happen. Now, I do think if they have LeSean McCoy and Frank Gore, I think they have two of the best running backs in the NFL. I think you can compare it, obviously, to the Browns when Kareem Hunt comes back. But I do think that they will be terrific at that running back position. It will take a load off of their young quarterback, that he can be able to hand off the ball and throw some short passes to those guys and make that happen.
Well, and they really love Devin Singletary, their rookie third-rounder, who is the third stringer behind LeSean McCoy and Frank Gore, and T.J. Yeldon floating around on the roster as well. So they have a very, very good and deep running back class, and that just makes it, look, at some point, and it happens to every player, at some point, it doesn't matter what you've done. It only matters what they think you're going to do tomorrow and how much they're willing to pay you for it. And I think that his salary's out of whack in comparison to his production. And I will not be surprised. In fact, I expect that at some point this month, there's going to be an attempt to get LeSean McCoy to redo his contract. And they may let him save some face with incentives or whatever. But I think that something is going to happen, because it's not, they always talk about the best interest of the team. How can you say it's in the best interest of the team to pay him that kind of money when he gave you 500 yards last year, Charean?
Yeah, so what have you done for me lately, league? And lately he hasn't been very good, and we don't list him among those top running backs in the NFL. I don't know if I'd put him in the top 10, really, when you start listing them, but he's certainly not in the top 5 of running backs, and his salary doesn't match with the production that we've seen. So, yeah, it's not going to surprise you if they do that. Would be a possibility for a cut or a trade. If, say, Ezekiel Elliott's not going to show up for the regular season, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, do you go try to get LeSean McCoy?
Hey, that's even juicier than Adrian Peterson and more realistic, because Buffalo's not in the division. So, you know, I continue to say and believe that if the Cowboys are serious about moving on and turning the page, that's the kind of move that would make me think they're serious. Alfred Morris does not make me think that they're serious about it. They make a trade for a LeSean McCoy. They try to get an Adrian Peterson. They look for another veteran tailback who may be available as the regular season approaches. That's when I think, hey, they are serious about hunkering down here and not paying Ezekiel Elliott a new contract in 2019.
Yeah, no question about it. And I know they like Tony Pollard. He looked good yesterday in practice. They were raving about him. Probably going to put a post on him today, but he is a rookie, and, you know, rookie running back, sometimes we see him do really well with Ezekiel Elliott and Kareem Hunt leading the league, and sometimes we don't. And I think it's a really tough thing to ask a rookie running back to come in, especially on a team that you feel like is a Super Bowl contender. To me, they need a veteran running back, and I don't know if Alfred Morris is the answer there at that position if they're looking for a veteran, if Zeke doesn't come in.
In exactly 1 month, the Cowboys will be hosting the Giants to start the 2019 regular season. And one of the big questions looming over the Cowboys and the entire NFL, will Ezekiel Elliott be there? And if not, what will they be doing? Here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be shutting up until tomorrow. Charean, thank you so much. 2 straight days for Charean. You'll probably never want to do it again after dealing with me for 2 straight days, but the opportunity will arise again at some point down the road. Chris Sims will be back tomorrow. Check us out around the clock at ProFootballTalk.com. Everybody have a great Thursday. We'll see you here on Friday.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.